thousands of American workers hostage. We expect the continuing resolution to clear the Senate and clear the House this afternoon and be signed by the President today. And before I go on, I think on both of us, but we want to thank all the federal workers from the bottom of our hearts. They've worked so selflessly this past month without pay, showing up to do a job they knew was important, but for which they weren't fairly compensated. The workers showed up despite the callous indifference of the administration, who treated them as hostages, who treated them as pawns, who belittled their financial strain. Our dedicated public servants should never, never have to go through this again. We will do everything we can to make sure they won't have to. And this past month has proven just how vital government services are to the American people, whether it's our food safety, our airports, our national parks, our economy, our national security, and so much else. The American people do not like it when you throw a wrench into the lives of government workers over an unrelated political dispute. Working people throughout America empathized with the federal workers and were aghast at what the president was doing to them. Hopefully now the president has learned his lesson. Now, once the president signs the continuing resolution, we in Congress will roll up our sleeves and try to find some agreement on border security. We don't agree on some of the specifics of border security. Democrats are firmly against the wall. But we agree on many things, such as the need for drug inspection technology, humanitarian aid, strengthening security at our ports of entry. And that bodes well for finding an eventual agreement, the fact that we have so many areas where we can agree. But today, the President will sign the bill to reopen the government along the outlines of what we have proposed. And hopefully, it means a lesson learned for the White House and for many of our Republican colleagues. Shutting down the government over a policy difference is self-defeating. It accomplishes nothing but pain and suffering for the country and incurs an enormous political cost to the party shutting it down. We cannot ever hold American workers hostage again. Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader, and thank you for your leadership in bringing us to this important resolution now, where shortly the Senate will send over to the House the paper. I came over to see the original paper, and we'll get it probably in a half an hour. Two resolutions, one to open up government for all of the agencies of government, and one to proceed to conference on the Homeland Security bill. We're pleased that we reached an agreement to reopen government now so that we can have a discussion on how to secure our borders. It is very clear that we all understand the importance of securing our borders, and we have some very good ideas on how to do that. And that will be part of the discussion as we go forward. House Democrats look forward to working in a bipartisan, bicameral way to pass all of the bills to open government as we proceed into the conference discussion. Now I'm an appropriator, and I was forged in that culture, and I know, left to their own devices, that the appropriators bicamerally and bipartisanly can come to conclusion. Again, sometimes it comes to the four principles of the leaders of the House and Senate to weigh in, and I think that we will have a very productive time in a short period of time to come to some conclusion. We're grateful, inspired by the courage and the determination of America's workers. They have shown during this crisis such strong character. But nonetheless, they have to pay the bills when they come due, whether it's a rent check, paying their mortgage, their credit card bills, their car payment, the list goes on. Some of them didn't even have gas money because they didn't have cash or any more line of or credit card ability to put gas in the car to go to work. It's really hard for some in the administration to understand how people live paycheck to paycheck and how marginal some of their existences are. makes a difference in how they educate their children, how they put food on the table, again, how they pay the rent, etc. So we thank them and are so glad that, as the President said earlier, as soon as possible or immediately. So I don't know which is faster, but the quickest of the two, they will receive their back pay and the pay that is due today. We're grateful to Democrats on both sides of the Capitol for their unity that was very, very important in these discussions. It's sad, though, that it's taken this long to come to an obvious conclusion. We talked about missed bills and financial security being shaken, sometimes questioning, putting in question the credit, how people's credit is viewed. And that's particularly problematic for our veterans, many of whom are in their jobs with security clearances. And a security clearance is affected if your credit rating is diminished. So we are grateful to our veterans who have donned the uniform of our country to protect us and then moved on to the civilian side to continue their public service. And we want them to have all the respect they deserve, as well as our other public employees, federal employees, who are working so hard to meet the needs of the American people. We value their purpose. We appreciate their diligence in performing their jobs, whether, as the leader said, keeping us safe, and in terms of civilian aviation, whether it's the FBI, other areas of public safety, but also just in so many ways, whether it's food safety and the rest. The list goes on. You're familiar with it. But we don't want in any way any shutdown of government to diminish the respect that we have for the purpose of our public employees and the excellence of their service. Disagreement in policy should never be a reason to shut down government, really shouldn't, especially, again, for a period of time that has an impact on the paychecks. I'm sad it has taken this long. I'm glad that we've come to a conclusion today as to how we go forward in the next 3 weeks. And again, I salute the minority, the Democratic leader in the Senate, for the work that he did to bring this. Because in the House we passed 10, but 10 times we passed the bill. Working with our leadership, Mr. Hoyer, 10 times he brought bills to the floor to open up government. And the most recent one that was presented on the Senate floor yesterday was so simple. $12 billion for disaster assistance and open up government for 2 weeks. The Republicans said no. I think the public weighed in. And I quote Lincoln all the time, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. And we thank the public for weighing in so strongly, for paying attention. And I think that will be the success of this conference. Again, as an appropriator, I participated in many conferences when we used to have them. This conference, that the public awareness is so increased and the public interest in it is so sharpened that they will see what the decisions are that we have to make and help weigh in on those decisions. I thank you again.
Okay. Wait. One at a time.
Thank you.
Come on, one at a time, please.
Wait a minute. Are you recognized?
Speaker,
Nancy.
The president has wanted this wall funding for a long time, but it wasn't until Democrats won the House that he really went to the mat for it. How much of all of this do you think is about the new power dynamic and his desire to show you who's really in charge?
I don't get your question. I mean, the point is today we have come to a way to go forward to debate the best ways to protect our border. I don't see this as any power play.
I'm referring to the past 36 days and the fact that he held out over wall funding.
Well, if you're saying that the president held out over wall funding to show who was in charge, I think that's quite a bad statement to make about any leader in our country. But what I do say is let's go forward, get this done. The leader mentioned lessons learned and hope that the people know that we cannot hold our public employees hostage because we have a disagreement. For how many, 34 days? Is it now over 1 month? having an impact on their lives. So I don't want to make any characterizations of the president's motivation. You'll have to ask him.
Go ahead.
Speaker Pelosi, did the president underestimate you politically? And can you assure the public that there won't be another impasse in 3 weeks?
I can't assure the public on anything that the president will do, but I do have to say I'm optimistic. I see every challenge or every crisis as an opportunity to do the right thing for the American people, and at the same time make people aware of what the decisions are that we have here, and hopefully that will make everybody come together in a way that is unifying for our country. I can't characterize the president's evaluation of me.
I just say one more thing in reference to that. I suggested to Leader McConnell that we use a conference committee format. That conference committee has Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, sitting at a table, has worked very successfully on Homeland Security and everything and all the other bills that haven't been signed over the last several years, even when the Republicans were in charge. And so I'm very optimistic that the conference committee can come to a good conclusion and we can avoid another shutdown. Go ahead, Cheryl.
The State of the Union go on as planned now.
The State of the Union is not planned now. I get that. What I'd said to the president is when government is open, we will discuss a mutually agreeable date. And I'll look forward to doing that and welcoming the president to the House of Representatives for the State of the Union when we agree on that mutual agreeable date.
This morning you were planning to announce a border security vision of Democrats, what you want. What is the state of that proposal, Senator? Also, can you...
We have been listening to breaking news on this busy Friday. Chuck Schumer and Speaker Pelosi there discussing the agreement reached with the president to reopen the government, how they'll do it. And just moments ago, as you heard, Speaker Pelosi saying that it doesn't mean the State of the Union is automatically back on, but they will work it out. Hans Nichols at the White House.
Yeah.
What are the highlights?
Well, I think the Pelosi kind of saying that they would need to negotiate a mutually agreeable date for the State of the Union means that there's no guarantee that the State of the Union will happen during this 3-week short-term funding. I also think you have to take note of the overall optimistic tone from both Speaker Pelosi and as well as Leader Schumer. Neither of them are doing big victory laps. Neither of them are doing big victory dances. And I think when you look at what you heard from the president, who spoke again just moments ago, he seemed to also be optimistic there's a chance that you could get a deal. He said there's a good chance. He seemed optimistic. There's an addendum, though, Ari, to what the president said, and that is he seemed to hint a little bit more explicitly than he did earlier in the Rose Garden that he would declare a national emergency if they didn't reach some sort of deal in this 3-week period coming up. So just to recap, no firm date on the State of the Union. The president threatening a little bit more on a national emergency, but all sides muting their rhetoric just a little bit, trying to give a little breathing space for a potential deal. All right?
Hans Nichols, Center of the Action at the White House, thank you. We turn back again, as I mentioned, to the other big story today, the charges against longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone, which stem from his much-touted links to WikiLeaks and those hacked Democratic emails during the campaign. Here's some key events before I bring in my next experts. You have March 2016, Russian hackers getting to Clinton campaign John Podesta's emails. Then Russian agents